Morning everybody, how are y'all doing today? I'm doing great because I just moved back into college. Classes start tomorrow, I'm pretty excited for that. And most importantly, I finally have something to talk about again. Thank you so much to Harman for providing us with this great video to take a look at. And of course, it's a massive cope session over Baldur's Gate 3, the game that has recently taken the internet by storm. Now obviously, as you can tell, I'm not playing Baldur's Gate 3 in this video, I'm playing Quake. More specifically, the remaster of Quake 2, and first of all, nobody bully me if I'm bad at this game. This game is very difficult, but yeah, the reason I'm not playing Baldur's Gate 3 is because I haven't gotten into it yet. I definitely am interested, but I want to wait until some of my friends get it so I can play it with them. But this is Harman we're talking about. I don't think I need to actually play the game before I can talk about this. And one more thing before we get into this, if my mic sounds any different, one, it's because I'm in a different room, obviously, so it's gonna make it sound different. But also, I don't know how soundproof the walls are, and I'm not trying to disturb my roommates. But yeah, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get right into this.
And Noma's gonna make it happen while the fans with a single game. This is 1E3 victory that Sony ponies can't claim. What a complete joke. What should have been like kind of a glorious moment for Nintendo. You know, the release of Tears of the Kingdom, the objective Game of the Year 2023 has been straight up damage controlled to high heaven all year long.
I'm sorry, but I genuinely have to know what exactly makes Tears of the Kingdom objectively Game of the Year. Like, sure, it's a great game, but how is it objectively the Game of the Year? The only way I can think of a game being objectively Game of the Year is if every single other game that comes out that year absolutely sucks. Luckily, I don't think this has ever been the case. Although, I guess you are right, Harman. People have been damage controlling Tears of the Kingdom being Game of the Year, and that's you. Anytime a good game comes out that people enjoy that isn't a Nintendo game, you have to sit there and talk about how much better Tears of the Kingdom is than that game. It seems like you are the one who is damage controlling. Although I must give credit where credit is due, that singing at the beginning was quite beautiful.
Since May, like pre-release, we had to like do this thing where like, oh, Tears of the Kingdom, that's not gonna sell well, that's gonna be a rehash. They had to delay it because they were scared of Elden Ring. Like, you know, there are so many better games coming out. Games like Forspoken, Final Fantasy 16, Starfield, Armored Core 6. Like, there were so many people talking so much trash about Tears of the Kingdom.
Who is actually saying this stuff though? Genuine question. This really feels like stuff he's making up in his mind. It's like he's imagining people saying this and then he's fighting them off in the real world. People who talk trash about Tears of the Kingdom are Harman Smith's Freddy Krueger. So yeah, who is talking all this trash about it? And then on top of that, who said this game wasn't gonna sell well? Because they are dumb and stupid. It's the sequel to one of the biggest Nintendo games ever made. Obviously, it was gonna sell ridiculously well. But also, just because people think a game like Starfield, Armored Core, Spider-Man, whatever, is gonna be a better game than Tears of the Kingdom, that doesn't mean they're talking trash about Tears of the Kingdom. You can like one thing more than another thing, and not talk trash about it. There's a difference between talking trash about something and having an opinion on something.
And then the game comes out, and it like kind of blows everyone's expectations out of the water. It's like one of the best games ever made. It improves on a lot of aspects of Breath of the Wild, and it's a real innovator. It is something that like people don't get very often, like a genuinely good video game. And of course, as always, when this happens, we've had to see the damage control. You know, people trying to like downplay the game, saying it's going to be forgotten, saying it's not all that great, it's not an innovator, it's overrated, that it's just a rehash of the original. Like, they're doing everything they possibly can to downplay Tears of the Kingdom.
Kind of like how you're doing everything possible to downplay any potential competition to Tears of the Kingdom. And look, I don't agree with a lot of the points he just brought up there, but I will say I do agree that the game is kind of overrated. It was definitely innovative, I'll give it that, and I especially felt this way about Breath of the Wild. It was a really good game, but I think it was definitely a bit overrated. Now, like I said earlier, that is not me talking trash about the game. I still think it's a great game. I just don't think it's as good as other people were saying it was.
However, over the past couple of months, the games that have come out since then, games like Diablo 4, Street Fighter 6, what else has come out? Like, there have been like a handful of releases that have come out and have just been like completely stomped by Tears of the Kingdom, right? 18.5 million units sold, right, in like less than 2 months. It has been phenomenally successful. It's well on its way to outselling Elden Ring, and it will go on, I think, to be a fan favorite for a lot of people. I personally see it as like probably one of my favorite Zelda games ever, purely because of just how unexpectedly great it was. You know, like, it really did surprise me, and surprise me with how good it was. And you know, this is a shoe-in for Game of the Year, obviously.
Well, you're right about that. There is no doubt this game will win Game of the Year. It's the sequel to Breath of the Wild. It's pretty much a guaranteed win. Maybe Baldur's Gate could pull it off, but honestly, Baldur's Gate is the only game I could see even coming close to it. I don't think Spider-Man and Starfield have a chance, to be honest. But just, of course he brings up Elden Ring. Of course he does. Still living rent-free in his head over a year and a half later, and he hasn't even played the game yet. But here's something I'm confused about, Harman. You said Tears of the Kingdom surprised you. Did you think it was gonna be a bad game? No, that's impossible. Harman, you need to remain a Nintendo fanboy, otherwise my content will go away.
But right now, we're in this kind of situation where there are a handful of people coming out trying to say that it has competition. Now, there are a lot of examples of this. Like, you know, I've seen people like throw out Hogwarts Legacy as an example of it. I believe it's the only AAA game that's outsold Zelda so far this year, but only because of the license. You know, I've seen people throw out Diablo 4. I've seen people throw out like Starfield, which is laughable to me. Starfield isn't going to do shit. You know, Alan Wake 2 is coming out. Like,
bro, if you think Starfield is gonna sell like crap, you are on a different kind of copium. Ever since the pre-orders opened up, the game has been within the top 10 best-selling games on Steam, not to mention all the people who are gonna play it through Game Pass. Also, I think after the Direct happened, like, Xbox sales in France or Germany or something like that increased by like 1,000%. See, Harman, this is the difference between you and other people who just criticize games regularly. Other people will criticize games but not hate on them. You do what you claim to hate, which is downplay any game coming out that could potentially be a threat to a Nintendo game. It's like the age-old saying from Crap Gamer, keep that same energy, bud.
there are all these games that are like, that people are just trying desperately to pretend can contend for Game of the Year, and it's really not even close, and everyone knows it's not even close. But as it so happens, like, a lot of people are just obsessed over the idea of like not allowing Nintendo to win Game of the Year, right? We saw this with 2020 with New Horizons, where Animal Crossing New Horizons, where like nobody was seriously pushing for that game to win Game of the Year, even though it totally should have. And we're seeing the same thing with Tears of the Kingdom. So much so that I really wonder if, like,
nobody is obsessed over the idea of Nintendo not winning Game of the Year. The main question right now that people have is, okay, Tears of the Kingdom came out, so that's pretty much a guaranteed win. However, now we have Baldur's Gate, which is an absolute masterpiece, and Bethesda's biggest game in a long time, which, if it's good enough, could potentially be a contender as well. And also, who the hell would ever push for Animal Crossing to be Game of the Year, and why? When you had games coming out like Ori and Ghost of Tsushima, how could you say with a straight face that Animal Crossing should have won Game of the Year 2020? Oh wait, I forgot who we're talking about. My bad.
The Game Awards, you know, the Jeff Keighley's official Game Awards, which right now is like the official industry standard depiction of what like the of what Game of the Year is. Like, I really wonder if they're going to give it to Tears of the Kingdom or not, or I wonder if they're going to try and like give it to some other project, right? Like, because there's nothing this year that seems like it can compete with it, right? Like, if they try to give it the Hogwarts Legacy, that would be unbelievably based. I honestly would prefer them to try to give it the Hogwarts Legacy, because first of all, that would showcase the Game Awards is unreliable and should not be trusted, and second of all, like, it would make the Troon seethe, right? So
Whoa. Alright, he really just said that casually. Okay, Harman, you gotta chill out, dude. Jesus. Look, obviously, yes, if Hogwarts Legacy won Game of the Year, that would make a lot of people angry. But come on, man, there's no need to say that. But moving on from that, will they get it to Tears of the Kingdom? I believe so. I think that's highly likely. But now that Baldur's Gate is out, I do think there's a chance that might win instead. Speaking of which, Harman, please be sure to live stream the Game Awards again this year, because if Tears of the Kingdom loses, I would love to watch your reaction. But let me get this straight. If a game besides Tears of the Kingdom wins, then the Game Awards is unreliable. Do I have this correct? The Game Awards is only reliable if Harman Smith's favorite game wins. Like, dude, I don't know why you put so much emphasis on the Game Awards. It's a fun little competition, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean anything. If God of War Ragnarok had won last year instead of Elden Ring, that wouldn't have made either game better or worse. At the end of the day, they're still both great games. The Game Awards is just for fun, my guy. I think you need to stop putting so much emphasis on them.
I personally would prefer Hogwarts Legacy to win like Game of the Year officially by most of these outlets purely for political reasons. But like when it comes to like my actual opinion, yeah, Tears of the Kingdom stops that. But like
Playing from Cody.
oops, what the hell is that? People
I'm sorry, what was that? Did his Alexa just go off or something? Oh my god. You really couldn't be bothered to cut that out? And even putting that aside, you can't be bothered to cut out like the 5 seconds you're just sitting there with a derp face, trying to think about what you're even trying to say? Imagine if I left all the silence between takes in my videos. That would be awful. People wouldn't want to watch them. Then again, we've seen countless times over the last few years that you don't give a damn about making good videos. You just want to defend Nintendo from the imaginary people attacking them, and then go back to writing whatever book you're doing next. Speaking of which, Alex might actually not be reading Harman's next book, so I think I might have to fall on that sword. My body is ready.
the Game Awards is an unreliable source of information, right? Like, we shouldn't take anything they say seriously. We shouldn't take anything they do seriously. So going into this, you know, talking about the Game Awards, talking about, like, what's going to win Game of the Year, like, I think we really need to put a fine line in the sand. Like, yeah, like, Tears of the Kingdom should win Game of the Year, and it is Game of the Year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, it's going to win any awards, right? Like, there are all these great games that are going to get passed over, like always, on Nintendo consoles, and, like, we're just going to have to, like, just, you know, just make fun of the show, as we always do, and just kind of talk about, like, the real winners of those categories, right?
So if the Game Awards aren't reliable and you shouldn't take them seriously, why do you spend so much time talking about them? I guarantee if Zelda wins Game of the Year, he's gonna say, oh, the Game Awards is based, oh, they're reliable, whatever. They're only reliable if they agree with what Harman says. Otherwise, I'm not going to take them seriously, but at the same time, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about them and taking them seriously. And most importantly, rage quitting when Elden Ring wins. But please continue to preach how we shouldn't take them seriously.
Like, we've seen this happen, like, several times already. I think Nintendo fans are used to it. I don't think anyone really takes, like, the concept of Game of the Year seriously. I think that is a known thing in the community, but I want to, like, reiterate that, like, as we go into this. Like, right now, we're kind of in this, this situation where Nintendo fans have to deal with the fact that PC gamers are trying to pretend that Baldur's Gate 3 has any hope ever about Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Finally, what are we, like over halfway through this video and we're just now talking about Baldur's Gate? But before we get into that, Harman, are you really trying to say nobody takes Game of the Year seriously? You just spent the past however many minutes talking about how Zelda is definitely Game of the Year, and if anything but Zelda wins, then the Game Awards are suddenly not trustworthy. Like, dude, you've got to be kidding me. You spend so much time talking about how all these Nintendo games should be Game of the Year, and then say, oh, it doesn't actually matter. Like, pick one. If it didn't matter, you wouldn't be talking about it so much. Also, why do Nintendo fans have to deal with it? You make it sound like it's such a bad thing. Oh no, people who play on PC think that Baldur's Gate 3 might be a Game of the Year contender. These poor Nintendo fans have to deal with that. Nobody has to deal with anything, Harman. You just let it bother you more than anybody else does.
And it's really interesting seeing their playbook on this, because they're citing the Metacritic scores, they're citing, like, audience sale, they're citing sales numbers, they're citing, like, you know, how many users it has on Steam. Like, they're doing, they're talking about how developers are all getting, like, extremely, like, agitated that, like, oh no, we can't make a game this good, it's raising people's standards too high. Like, they're talking about all this stuff, and like, it really makes you think back to, like, Tears of the Kingdom, where, like, the same thing happened but it was legitimate.
What do you mean the same thing happened, but it was legitimate? I don't remember any developers crying over Tears of the Kingdom being a good game. In fact, when I think of Baldur's Gate 3, the first other game I think of is Elden Ring, because they're both RPGs and they're both making developers salty because of how good they are. But like, what are you talking about? Oh, well, with Tears of the Kingdom, it was legitimate, but with this, it isn't. Are you saying this is like fake outrage or something like that? Why would you even say that? Like, what makes this fake outrage, but Tears of the Kingdom, which I didn't even know there was any outrage over that. But yeah, what makes this fake, but the Tears of the Kingdom outrage real? Oh, sorry, because one's a Nintendo game, my mistake.
Right? Like, Baldur's Gate 3 has all the markings of like the typical Last of Us Part 2 style, like media blitz campaign. You know, the Cyberpunk 2077 like media blitz campaign, where a bunch of people come out and try to say this game is Game of the Year. It's one of the best games ever made, period. And if you disagree, you're just a hater. You hate it because it's so popular, right? Like, if The Last of Us Part 2 had not been leaked ahead of time and we knew about what Naughty Dog was trying to pull, what Neil Druckmann was doing, how the gaming media was going to spider in this, like, it's possible that we might have actually like not gone into The Last of Us Part 2 like as informed as we actually were, and like that information is what led to the game ultimately bombing.
Okay, look, The Last of Us 2 was not a good game. It did not bomb, though. It sold like 10 million units. That is not the game bombing. But wow, dude, you mean to tell me that without leaks, we're not as informed on a game as we could be? Who would have thought? It's almost like that's the point of leaks, is to give more information about a game. But Baldur's Gate 3 is not the same situation as The Last of Us 2 and Cyberpunk. Comparing it to Cyberpunk, it actually launched completed. The developers didn't lie about anything or try to withhold information. And compared to The Last of Us 2, you know, the game is actually good. It has a good story. This wasn't a case where the game got review bombed so bad that they had to turn off the ability to leave a negative review. It's not like this game was so broken at launch it got pulled from the PlayStation Store like with Cyberpunk. This is just an actually good game, and the media happens to think it's good as well. The Last of Us 2 and Cyberpunk were different stories. Those games were bad when they came out. In the case of Cyberpunk, it barely functioned, but Baldur's Gate 3 is an actual good functioning game with a good story, and it's not completely broken. If this really was a case of, oh, the media is just trying to push it, then the media would be giving the game praise, but everybody else would be hating on it. Instead, everybody else seems to be loving the game. That 9.2 or 9.1, whatever user score, is looking pretty good.
And leading to the game, like, leading to massive backlash right out of the gate. Like, in spite of all the damage control, in spite of all like the narrative pushing from the media, and like Baldur's Gate 3 is an interesting case where it's the same exact thing, right? You know, an extremely degenerate, like left-wing, like SJW product, you know, an extremely woke product that is being pushed by game journalists, right? Like, this is like the equivalent of Gone Home, you know, No Man's Sky, like No Man's Sky is a good example. Stuff like Braid, you know, stuff like, you know, Binding of Isaac, like, you know, absolute trash that's propped up by the industry for arbitrary reasons. Psychonauts 2, I think, is a really good example of a game that was like very heavily promoted.
Oh my god, this isn't synthetic, man. I really don't want to get into the whole, oh, Baldur's Gate 3 is woke conversation. You know what? How about this? Let me know in the comments if you want me to go over Synthetic Man's video on this game. I really don't want to, but if enough of you guys want me to, then I will. But again, you're using an example like No Man's Sky. Oh, it was pushed by everybody because it looked really good, and then it ended up sucking when it came out. This is not that case, though. This game does not suck. It has a very high user score. Clearly, it's not just the journalists who like this game. Clearly, just people like this game as well. This is not the same situation. But Harman, this makes me wonder, is Zelda the same situation? Does this mean that Zelda is the same as a game like Cyberpunk or The Last of Us 2? Because that was pushed very hard by journalists. So by your own logic, I guess Tears of the Kingdom is equivalent to Cyberpunk, even though Tears of the Kingdom was actually completed on launch and everybody really liked it on launch. I guess by your logic, it must be the same exact situation.
Very, very well received by critics, but was just complete trash, like, objectively. Baldur's Gate 3 is The Last of Us Part 2. The only difference here is that, like, most audiences like aren't invested in Baldur's Gate. They're not like D&D fans. They don't know like exactly what all like why people are talking about this game, like because it's woke specifically, and like they're just getting like kind of confused by it. Like normal audiences are looking at this thing and they're just like, okay, it's D&D. You have a lot of dialogue options. You can bang everyone in the game. You know, you can have a BBC if you want, but like that's been in games already. There's nothing special about it.
Well, by this logic, I guess Tears of the Kingdom just sucks, because we've seen building mechanics before in other games. We've seen walking through walls in other games. We've seen sword and bow combat before. So I guess Tears of the Kingdom sucks then, right? No? Yeah, I didn't think so. Hear me out. We've seen stuff like this before, but maybe in this game in particular, it's much more fun and engaging, and there's just so much you can do in the game. Maybe that's why people like it so much. If there wasn't anything special about it, then why has the game already sold like almost 6 million copies on PC alone? And also, I have to know, what exactly defines a normal audience to you? People who aren't interested in D&D stuff? Because wow, who would have guessed somebody who isn't into D&D might not be into a D&D game? Crazy concept. But the game clearly has a market. There's a reason it's talked about so much and it's been so successful.
Right? There's nothing like particularly unique, innovative, or fresh about this game. And like when you compare it to Tears of the Kingdom, which is, you know, like a true AAA experience with like, you know, great new mechanics, you know, crazy creativity, you know, like over 70 hours of content, like for the main story alone, like Tears of the Kingdom just objectively stomps it in every way imaginable, but the industry does not want to admit it.
Kind of like how you don't want to admit that Baldur's Gate 3 is actually good and millions of people like it. But Harman, if you like the 70 hours of content in Tears of the Kingdom, you would love Baldur's Gate 3. This game can go on for over 100 hours. And that's just for a single playthrough. And I love how he says, oh, Tears of the Kingdom, it's got these great new mechanics, which I do agree the mechanics in Tears of the Kingdom are cool. But he dunks on Baldur's Gate for having things that have been in previous games, but then he won't mention that, oh, there's been building in other games besides Tears of the Kingdom. Like, yes, it's a great mechanic in Tears of the Kingdom, but it's not like new to the entire industry. But of course he won't mention that. And look, Harman, you make this point a lot that, oh, you know, nobody wants to admit that this game is way better than this other game. Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe you're just in the minority here. Or maybe nobody cares about which game stomps which game, and people just care about playing fun games. Like, you really need to work on your thought process, Harman. Nobody is admitting the thing that I'm thinking. That must mean everybody else is wrong. Like, God, that's stupid.
Right, and it's kind of fascinating to look back on this because last night I'm seeing this narrative being pushed in 4chan, right, about how developers are scared of Baldur's Gate 3 because it's just too good of a game and they can't live up to it. But like, I saw the same exact story come up with Tears of the Kingdom, but in that case, it actually made sense because Tears of the Kingdom legitimately does things that like other AAA developers will never do, right? Like it'll actually make a fresh new experience with this video game. Though, like no one else could have done what Nintendo did with Tears of the Kingdom, basically, right?
Bro, you're gonna trash talk games like Baldur's Gate 3, but then say Tears of the Kingdom is a fresh new experience? Obviously, yes, they added a bunch of stuff, but the game is still very similar in a lot of ways to Breath of the Wild. It's not like this is a completely unique take on a Zelda game. They just took Breath of the Wild and expanded it. By this logic, Baldur's Gate 3 is also fresh. This double standard is absolutely insane. Tears of the Kingdom has similarities to the first game, and Baldur's Gate 3 has similarities to the second game. This is how sequels work, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, you only think there's nothing wrong with that if it's a Nintendo game.
But like when you look at like Baldur's Gate 3, there's nothing special about it. Like whenever you ask people to elaborate what makes the game great, they give you some vague like assertion that like they'll try to tell you that like, oh, you can fuck a bear, or like you can do this. Like it's so obviously fake, right? Very, very fake, right? Just like it is just absurd how we have to keep going through this like these motions every year, where like for a brief period of time, like the new hot game is like something that everyone's talking about, everyone's worshiping, and the thing that everyone's pretending is better than what Nintendo is doing, right?
Bro, nobody who gets one of these great games like Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate is immediately thinking, oh yeah, this absolutely stomps on Nintendo. There's no way they can win Game of the Year now. This game is so much better. No, they probably just enjoy the game that they got. Because guess what? Normal people don't obsess over what games are better than others. Normal people just enjoy the games they like to play. You treat every single good game that comes out like an attack against Nintendo. That's not the case. You can praise something without dunking on another thing. Then again, I guess you wouldn't know that because anytime a good Nintendo game comes out, you use that game to claim that Nintendo's the leader of the industry. Nobody could even come close to being as good as they are. I've said it a lot before, but I'll say it again. He makes up these situations in his mind where like any non-Nintendo game that people like, people are just using that to weaponize against Nintendo. And then Harman Smith has to come out and defend them. Just because people like a non-Nintendo game doesn't mean people hate Nintendo games all of a sudden. That doesn't make any sense.
Like, we go through this all the time. We had to go through this last year with Elden Ring, and it seems like history is repeating itself with Baldur's Gate 3. But unlike Elden Ring, which I think I was able to at least trick people into buying it because, oh, look, it's an open world game, like Skyrim. Like, Baldur's Gate 3 seems like comparatively niche. And I do think this is the end result of, like, all of these studios just kind of burning through their goodwill because they are 100% like losing the control they used to enjoy over the industry. Like, people no longer take what they say seriously. Like, it's remarkable to me that, like, this game has a 97 on Metacritic, and yet, like, no one really gives a shit. Like, I looked at that score, and I'm reminded of how, like, The Last of Us Part 2 had, like, I don't know, a 92 or something like that.
Yeah, and Tears of the Kingdom has a 96, so what does that mean? Does that mean nobody cares about it? Like, this logic makes no sense. Oh, Baldur's Gate 3 has a 97 on Metacritic, but nobody cares about it? Like, what are you talking about? Also, clearly you care about it because you actually made a video a couple days ago talking about how Baldur's Gate dropped from a 97 to a 96. And apparently this was just so worth having an entire video dedicated to. So Harman, riddle me this. If Baldur's Gate has a higher user score and critic score than Tears of the Kingdom, what does that say about Tears of the Kingdom? Does that mean nobody cares about it? Does that mean that Nintendo is losing control over the industry that they once had? Like, I'm actually so confused watching this right now. You ever have like a fever dream where you have no idea what's going on at all and you're trying to make sense of it, but it like really stresses you out trying to make sense of it? That's what's happening with me right now. Harman Smith videos are legitimately a fever dream to watch. Nothing makes sense, and it's hard to argue against his points because he's not even really making a point. He's just kind of saying a bunch of stuff that he makes up in his head.
Like, Metacritic has not been a reliable source, has not been considered a reliable source for, like, objective reviewing in a very long time. If anything, it's been seen as, like, the benchmark for, like, games that are pushed onto the consumer base, right? Like, kind of like, the sales numbers things. Like, we're seeing something similar now with the Barbie movie, where they're trying to pretend this movie is like some massive like cultural phenomenon. One of the best movies of the year when it clearly isn't. Like,
oh god, and now we're talking about the Barbie movie. Please, somebody end me. And Harman, again, if Metacritic doesn't matter, why do you talk about it so much? Why are you even bringing it up? You spend so much time talking about Metacritic, but then you say it doesn't matter. But then a few days after you made this video, you made another one talking about the fact that the Metacritic score for Baldur's Gate 3 had dropped. So does it matter or does it not? You have to make up your mind, dude. Unfortunately, he does not for the rest of the video, and that is why I'm gonna end this video right here. A bit of an abrupt cutoff, I know, but there was only like a minute left and he just basically repeats himself a bunch, so not really worth covering. So yeah, anyway guys, basically what we learned today is that Metacritic doesn't matter, but Harman Smith continues to bring up Metacritic, and the same goes for the Game Awards as well. And we also learned that Baldur's Gate 3 is the new Last of Us 2 or Cyberpunk, even though the game is actually good. And it's not just journalists pushing the game, gamers in general seem to really really love it. But most importantly, we learned that this game could never compete with Tears of the Kingdom. And why? Because it's not a Nintendo game, that's why. So yeah, anyway guys, with that being said, that's gonna do it for this video. I just wanted to apologize really quick for the lack of uploads. I just moved back into school, like I said at the beginning of the video. That's why I got so much louder towards the end, is because I figured out, you know, soundproofing and stuff like that. And yeah, I finally have a few videos that I want to make. I'm not just scrounging around for scraps anymore. So I'm really excited to be doing that alongside getting back into school and everything. So yeah, with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will catch you all next time.